Hi there, I'm Duncan from Policy and Practice, and I'm going to talk you through how our benefit and budgeting calculator can be used to simplify the impact of surplus earnings on your client. The Universal Credit Surplus Earnings regulations govern the treatment of spikes in income. The theory behind them is that if people have irregular earnings which vary from month to month or from assessment period to assessment period, any large payments in one month can be partially saved by a claimant to cover their costs in a subsequent month, meaning they won't be paid as much universal credit in that month. The regulations can be very complex and often require month-to-month calculations in order for advisors to assist claimants, particularly as claimants will need to be forewarned of upcoming household income fluctuations and will probably need to set aside some income to cover subsequent months during which the universal credit award will be reduced. That's where our benefit and budgeting calculator can help by taking these complex rules and making it really straightforward for a client to understand how the rules will impact them. So you can see here that I've set up a case receiving regular earnings, and we can see the benefits they would be getting. And that's on our results tab. If we move to the Universal Credit Calendar tab, we can then see how that income breaks down monthly. And because we have regular earnings, we also have a regular universal credit payment, and level income that's steady every month because of that monthly earnings. So that's great for people who have a steady monthly wage, but for those who have had more irregular earnings, for instance, those who might be in receipt of the Self-Employed Income Support Scheme, which can pay out up to £7,500 in one go to cover 3 months of lost earnings, is a bit more complicated. So let's see what would happen if this claimant was actually someone who had applied for the Self-Employed Income Support Grant rather than earning a regular monthly wage. So we'll change their earnings, we'll set them to 0, and we'll say they worked 0 hours for this bit. We can then go back to the results, and then the Universal Credit Calendar. So we can say they are now receiving earnings paid on an irregular basis, yes. We can then break down when you receive those irregular earnings. Now, the first round of the Self-Employed Income Support Scheme should have paid out in June, so that would be 80% of someone's earnings over the last 3 months. And in this case, we'll say they received £6,250. And then there's a second round of the Self-Employed Income Support Scheme. And in that round, you can receive 70% of earnings, so in this case, £5,470. And you can apply for that round in August, and you might receive it in September, we'll say, for this case. So we've input some large but irregular earnings to cover several months without our usual self-employed earnings. Let's see how that impacts what we'll be receiving in universal credit from month to month. And we can see here it's not steady as it was before with the regular traditional earnings. You can see in the first assessment period covering May and paid in early June, the Universal Credit Award is normal as it was before, but it's then that we look in July when the large grant means that the Universal Credit goes down to 0, we can see here, but the total income is obviously very high because it includes that large grant. And then in August, we can see that that large grant is still impacting the universal credit payment, so it's just really quite low, just £100. And then other income in this period as well is just £66. So overall in that period, they're really receiving not nearly as much as they usually would. So that's when we need to save part of that self-employed grant to cover our costs in this month, which may be fine. But we may also need to bear in mind that that grant is covering lost earnings due to COVID, which potentially started being disrupted as early as March, so there may also be outstanding historic costs we need to deal with using the grant. If so, being forewarned that overall income in August is going to be so low is crucial if we're to safely budget to cover both historic and ongoing costs. And we can see that likewise, our universal credit dips again in October and November, so again the client can be prepared for those varying earnings. Now, the more we go into the policy behind this, the more complex it can seem, but for the client, they just need to know when and how their income is going to fluctuate. So all they need is this quick calendar here, which you can handily print off for them using the print button at the bottom. They can then take it home, pin it to the fridge, and know exactly how far their self-employed income support grant will need to stretch, and when they need to be prepared for their universal credit to drop. So there we are. The calculator takes these complex rules and translates them into a simple to understand calendar, showing the claimant precisely how their income may fluctuate.